Hello, and welcome back to Fem Life. If you'd like to support me, please use my affiliate links mentioned below. Every purchase you make will bring me closer to my gender transition. I was born on Sunday, September 26, 1965, in Somerville, New Jersey. Named Ernest after my father and Charles after his paternal grandfather, I was seen as a delicate child from the start. My mother often remarked that I was easily unsettled if things weren't just so. My father, however, always claimed I was a well-behaved baby. A simple no and a gentle tap on my hand were enough to correct my behavior. The first 3 years of my life were fairly uneventful. By age 3, I had a strong sense that I should have been born female. At that age, I didn't understand the differences between genders but felt a clear sense of identity as a woman. It felt dissonant and uncomfortable when adults insisted I was destined to grow up as a man. My mother had hoped for a daughter during her pregnancy, but she reassured me that she cared more about having a healthy baby than the child's gender. I gravitated towards playing with dolls and became fascinated with the Dawn doll series. My godmother gave me a colorform set with Dawn dolls, allowing me to change their outfits. I was drawn to these toys and avoided playing with matchbox cars and trucks, which my older half-brother often forced me to use. At this time, I also began walking on my toes, mimicking high-heel shoes, which unsettled my family. I preferred the company of girls and got along with them better than with boys. During my first and only year of nursery school, my mother mentioned that the boys picked on me. Fortunately, I was taken under the wing of the nursery school's owner's older daughter. I was a sweet-natured child, obedient and compliant. In games of house, I always chose to be the daughter, finding comfort in the feminine role. I often acted in a way that was considered effeminate, and some neighborhood teens even used derogatory terms to describe me. I enjoyed dressing up in my mother's and friends' mothers' clothes, especially high-heel shoes. I had many female friends and only a few male friends, as I felt more at ease with girls. They played with toys I preferred and understood me better. Being around boys felt awkward and I struggled to connect with them. They were also uncomfortable with my effeminate behavior and interests, which made me feel even more isolated. Around age 5, I received a Raggedy Andy doll as a gift. Disappointed because I had wanted Raggedy Ann, I went trick-or-treating as Raggedy Ann that Halloween. It was a rare opportunity to dress as a girl, and fortunately, there's a photograph of me in that costume. My older brother didn't manage to destroy it. Though I wasn't physically bullied, I was often ignored due to my gender expression. I felt isolated, and my girlish tendencies made me appear strange to others. I tried to conform to male expectations to avoid trouble, but remained true to my identity. My mother supported this in her own way, letting me spend time with her and her female friends, allowing me to be surrounded by conversations and company that resonated with me. I'll start with my mother. Born on March 3, 1922, she was the child of Italian immigrants. My grandfather arrived in America around 1919, likely seeking to escape Mussolini's rise to power, though his exact reasons are unclear. My grandmother and 2 uncles followed in 1920. My mother married her first husband in the mid-1940s. He was an alcoholic and abusive to her and my older half-brother. After his death in 1962, she met my father about a year later. They married on January 4, 1964, and I was conceived roughly a year after that. My mother later described my conception as an accident, as she had been told she couldn't have more children. She was 43 when I was born and experienced complications during pregnancy, including spotting that required her to stay off her feet. A friend of hers had hoped for a girl, and I think my mother did too, though she ended up with a daughter born with male anatomy. My mother left her factory job from World War II, forfeiting her pension, a fact she reminded me of throughout my life. I was pampered by her friends and indulged by her. My mother's spoiling meant I wasn't walking by age 1. She recounted a story where my Aunt Lindsay was visiting with keys I wanted. Despite my aunt's refusal to give them to me, I managed to walk over and get them, showing my determination even then. During potty training, I would only follow my mother into the bathroom, and I vaguely remember learning to sit down to pee. When I was about 2.5, my mother took in her elderly parents and a blind, deaf, and mute brother. Her parents stayed with us for about a year before they passed away. My grandfather died on January 1, 1968, and about 6 months later, my grandmother fell, breaking her hip. This led to several mini-strokes, and she only remembered me. I visited her daily at the nursing home, where I was well cared for by the nurses who found me easy to manage. My grandmother died in October 1968, and I struggled with their deaths. I recall a moment at a train station with my father and younger brother, where my father told me I was making enough noise to wake the dead, to which I responded that it would be good if Grandma and Grandpa could come back. Now, about my father. I know little about his background. He rarely spoke of his childhood. All I know is that his parents divorced and he spent time in various foster homes. While I once admired him greatly, I now see him as a rather unpleasant person. I was a disappointment to him due to my quiet and gentle nature. He was thrilled when my younger brother was born, as he could teach him all his troublesome ways. My father was a secret drinker, hiding beer in the trunk of his car. When I was around 6, he would have me buy movie tickets and take my younger brother into the theater so he could stay in the car and drink. My Uncle Frank was an exceptionally intelligent and capable man. Despite being both blind and deaf, he managed to handle many daily tasks independently. He could cane chairs, walk our dog, and shave by himself. He was thoughtful and always remembered birthdays, and he was remarkably adept at woodworking, creating durable and long-lasting pieces. My older half-brother was born on April 30, 1944. He joined the Navy in 1963 but left 2 years later when they wouldn't send him to Vietnam. He was just out of the Navy when I was born. He often criticized me for not being masculine enough. For instance, he disliked it when I played with dolls and toy stoves, insisting that I play with Matchbox cars instead. I seldom played with the cars, so they remained in good condition until my younger brother used them. My younger brother was born on May 22, 1969. I helped my mother care for him, and there are many photos of us together where I'm either hovering over him or holding him tightly. I suppose I was an overprotective older sibling. He had a tendency to be hard on toys, often taking them apart to see how they worked, while I preferred to keep my belongings in pristine condition. I lived in Middlesex, New Jersey until I was 8, after which we moved to Lawrenceville, New Jersey because my dad wanted to avoid commuting. I hoped this move would mean more time with my dad, but it didn't turn out that way. As a very shy child, losing my friends was difficult. In our new neighborhood, I gravitated towards 2 girls across the street, which was ideal as it allowed me to play female roles and with dolls without having to ask my parents. I still felt uneasy around boys and had little interest in sports or typical male activities. I preferred reading quietly. Growing up, my mother frequently let me spend time with her and her friends, which influenced me to adopt more feminine behaviors. I also witnessed firsthand the negative aspects of male behavior through her stories. My mother would criticize me for exhibiting typical male behaviors, like interrupting conversations, and I often faced long lectures about manners and consideration. I mostly chose to play with girls and enjoyed imaginative games. Playing with their dolls and dollhouses suited me well. Around age 7 or 8, my parents enrolled me in judo classes to learn self-defense, but I was uncomfortable and it didn't last long. I was also enrolled in the Cub Scouts until we moved to Lawrence Township. Later, I joined the Boy Scouts but was unhappy as it interfered with watching the Donnie and Marie show. I complained until my mother allowed me to quit. I was never comfortable around boys, as I struggled to understand them, and they didn't understand me either. At around 10, my mother warned me that if I didn't keep my private areas clean, they would fall off. I stopped washing them because I didn't like how it felt. I wanted to test her claim, but they stayed intact. To this day, I rarely touch them. I started puberty when I was 12. But I was closer to 13 when I mentioned to my doctor that I was feeling a stiffness between my legs. I thought I was dying. He tried to explain to me about gender and the differences between boys and girls. I guess I must have looked confused because he recommended a book for me to read. When I started to develop body hair, I really hated my body and very rarely exposed it. When I was 14, I went to a summer camp for 2 weeks. It was at the camp that I started to become depressed with suicidal tendencies. When I came home, I told my doctor and he had me go see a psychiatrist. I was in single and group therapy for 2 years. The depression seemed to ease a little. My one regret now is that I never mentioned my gender issues with him. Maybe I could have started transitioning earlier. Around this time, I prayed to God every night to make me a girl so that I could be happy. Around my teen years, I liked to sneak into my mother's closet and wear her shoes and costume jewelry. I would imagine that I was Scarlett O'Hara. Gone with the Wind was and still is my favorite book and movie. I couldn't wear her dresses though, because my mother was a lot shorter than me. By the time I started high school, I was practically a social outcast. I remember walking past groups of kids and hearing them laugh. High school was something I tolerated. There was one incident that happened to me when I was in 10th grade. I had to go to the bathroom real bad. I saw a door that I knew was a bathroom, but no sign as to whether it was a girl's room or a boy's room. I went in, did not pay attention to the fact that there were no urinals, since I always used a stall. While I was doing my business, I heard voices as a group entered the restroom. I was still not paying attention to what gender the voices were. I finished what I was doing and left the stall that was when I noticed that I was in the girls' room. There was a bunch of girls there. Boy, was I red-faced. I know that they must have kidded me some. I thought I was going to be in a whole mess of trouble, but it was never reported. During high school, I became interested in painting and drawing and became quite good at them. During my senior year, my mother had a heart attack around Christmas. I had to take over the cooking of meals for a little while. I was always good in the home economics classes. It was woodshop that was my cross. It would take me 6 weeks to barely get one woodshop project done. It was during this time that my mother and I found out that my dad had a mistress. He even tried to buy a house for her from the inheritance he received after his mother died. He didn't have enough on his own and tried to get my mother to help finance it by taking a second mortgage on our house. She refused and he lost the other house. It was around this time that my feelings for my father changed. That summer also proved to be very eventful. I was accepted into Trenton State College as an art major. My whole senior year of high school was spent in trying to get me to live on campus. The school was fighting me over the 10-mile radius. I credit my guidance counselor for encouraging me to stick with the fight. I was soon allowed to live on campus. My Uncle Frank was diagnosed with a cancerous tumor on his spine. The doctors opened him up to see if they could remove it. They couldn't, so my uncle was scheduled for radiation treatments. It was while he was having this therapy that I found out about art therapy. The treatments worked, they shrunk the tumor. But about 2 months later, we found that the cancer had moved to his liver. My bedroom was next to his, so I could hear him moaning through the night. I started my freshman year of college and had a difficult time of adjusting at first. Around the beginning of October, my uncle went into the hospital for the last time. He died about 2 weeks later. To this day, I still miss him. He was a truly remarkable person. Around the age of 19, I began to feel that I should have been born a girl. I reasoned that if God had intended me to be female, I would have been born as such. This led me into a prolonged period of denial, accepting my male body despite my inner feelings. I struggled with the idea that being male was a mistake, and for years, I tried to conform to male behavior without much success. In my mind, I still saw myself as female. When I was about 20 or 21, an unsettling incident occurred while I was working at the college library over the summer. One day during lunch hour, while alone in the stacks, I noticed a man leaving who gave me an uncomfortable feeling. He returned shortly after and entered the shelves ahead of me. A few minutes later, I heard some rustling but ignored it. I went back to my table to organize books when the man called me over. I approached him, thinking he needed help finding something, only to see him exposing himself. He asked if I wanted to get together, and I immediately declined and left. He lingered for a few minutes, trying to get my attention, but eventually left. Afterwards, I felt sick and violated. I confided in a supervisor, who advised me to report the incident to campus police. I hesitated, fearing they might blame me due to my effeminate appearance. For the next week, I forced myself to return to that section of the library, haunted by the experience. I regret not having reported it. I graduated from college in 1988 and took an hourly clerical position with the New Jersey Department of Personnel. I remained in this role for 5 years before becoming a permanent employee, staying with the department for 11 years. Last year, several significant events prompted a major life decision. My father developed health issues and was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, requiring placement in a nursing home after he started wandering. Additionally, my mother lost his pension check. With my income insufficient to maintain our home in New Jersey and growing dissatisfaction with my job, I requested a transfer within my department, which was denied. In August, we put our house on the market and accepted the highest offer in September. I decided to move to South Carolina. I visited 2 college friends in upstate New York and immediately fell in love with the area. Fortuitously, I ended up buying a house on the same street as my friends. Finding a job took some time, but eventually, I secured a position as a cook at Pizza Hut. I enjoy the work and appreciate the opportunity to interact with people much younger than me. During this period, I discovered a website focused on transgender issues. On the site, I took a test called the Cogiati, which is designed for those dealing with transgender questions. The results indicated I might be a transsexual. Initially, I wasn't ready to accept this, so I adjusted my responses to fit a more traditionally male perspective. This resulted in a score that placed me as androgyne and feminine male. Despite my efforts to reconcile with being a male with a strong feminine side, my honesty led me back to recognizing myself as a probable transsexual. After coming to terms with this, I retook the test and confirmed my transsexual identity. I am now in the process of finding a therapist to verify this diagnosis. Once confirmed, I will decide on the next steps, trusting that my feelings and guidance will lead me in the right direction. It feels liberating to stop pretending to be something I am not. I have started therapy and will begin hormone treatment soon. I've also begun dating and am in a long-term relationship with a wonderful man. In preparation for this new chapter, I've started assembling my first female wardrobe. I now own several skirts, blouses, and my boyfriend, a female-to-male transsexual who learned to sew growing up, is making me a dress. I've also bought various pairs of shoes, pantyhose, and padded bras, and look forward to a time when I won't need the padding. The first time I wore pantyhose was a unique experience. I found it easiest to lie on the bathroom floor to put them on. Since I'm on the smaller side, the pantyhose help achieve a more feminine silhouette. I also discovered that pantyhose with runs are excellent for padding bras, effectively filling out a C-cup. I leave all my female clothes at my boyfriend's place, and as soon as I arrive, I change into them. I enjoy wearing them and dread switching back to male clothing. I'm also becoming more comfortable with applying makeup, thanks to Kevin Aucoin's Making Faces, which features transformative photos of a beautiful woman who is actually a male. I have a few more aspects and behaviors to master before I venture out publicly dressed as a woman. Thankfully, at 5 feet 7 inches with a small frame and without an Adam's apple, and with my voice unchanged, I feel more confident. I hope my story can offer support to others struggling with similar issues and encourage them to seek help. Ignoring these feelings only leads to unnecessary suffering.